So now we're going to invite our keynote speaker. Before I bring the keynote speaker of Professor Yemi Oke, I am going to briefly go over his biography. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Professor Yemi Oke, who is our keynote speaker for today. He's a managing partner at MGS Partners. So Professor Yemi Oke, SAN, is a professor of law and consulting partner in power, energy, and dispute resolution, an authority in electricity law, oil and gas, mining law, and international environmental law. He gained his LLM and PhD from the Osgoode, permits my pronunciation, All Law School, York University, Canada, with over 110 publications and 15 law books. He has led legal transaction and dispute resources across Nigeria, Canada, and the United Nations, and of course beyond. A fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and the Chartered Institute of Taxation. Is also a managing partner of MJS Partners. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome and a virtual clap to our keynote speaker, Professor Oke. Professor Oke, please feel free to share your screen, and then the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I was, because of the location I wasn't immediately able to prepare a slight delay now, but I will interact and I tried to send some thoughts across to you guys. The impression given was that it was going to be essentially an interactive session because
That's
energy,
fine as well.
as aware, is something that we all contend with. I was going to share my insights, kind of the experiences I've had over the past few decades engaging the decentralization master for purpose of energy solution and energy asset, which is key. Um, and of course, I've been able to take the discourse, the debate, the advocacy back home in Nigeria, and I have some success stories to share. When we talk of energy, energy is something that will never be sufficient. We need to have that at the back of our mind. We can never have adequate energy anywhere in the world, irrespective of the source. If you're looking at renewable energies, can never be sufficient because human beings, of course, by the nature of human beings, would get impatient as to certain things. Of course, once we have 3 hour, like access for 3 hours, we want to get like to extend it to 5. Then when you have solar, you also thinking of other sources. Then you want to expand your business, you want to expand your energy usage and the rest. And then we have contending forces. So energy can never be enough. So when we talk of access, we want to start to look at access as a right-based discourse. And we argue ESPA even for purpose of environmental advocacy. We say, okay, if you have guaranteed me right to life, you don't need to care before right to life is violated. All you need to is to make sure my environment is poisoned. I will definitely have been deprived of the right to life. That's the advocacy we've been pushing in terms of energy. We're saying those homes, those communities, those businesses must have access to energy as a matter of right. So we now introduce what we call right-based discourse to energy advocacy. And we looked at what other countries have been doing in South Africa, in Namibia, and other countries. I mean, taking it from the sub-Saharan African level, even beyond comparing it to what the developed countries are doing. Uh, Energy is something that could be generated from virtually everything and anything. If you have excessive landfill, that's a good input for renewables. If you have reliable sunshine, you can adapt that for solar. If you have appropriate wind tunnels, that's wind energy. If you have decent natural water flows, that's hydro. And you can also go the option of gas. So we have an array of options when we talk of energy. The challenge is aggregating those options for human use. How have we been able to tap into those options for human use? So that brings about the call for decentralization. And meaning that you don't want to look at a mono source. You don't want to look at just a source for energy. You need to derive your energy from every available sources. For instance, we went to Namibia. We realized Namibia was already even attempting by deploying technology to generate energy from forests. So when I engage in Nigerian government, you have forests that had served as heaven, hideout for criminals, for kidnappers. Down south, your fellow African country is generating energy from that kind of forest via the bushing technology that extract energy from forests. So Anna said the Sambisa forest in Nigeria should be converted for purposes of energy, as against using meat, of course, as handled for criminals. And that was to tease the federal government. And we took the narrative down. We now went moral, we went ethical, we went scientific, and we went legal. And now we challenge the federal government to look at this energy solution. We pointed out that a country, for our audience, Nigeria started to generate energy as far back as 1896 as a country through the colonial government, and that happened in Ijora in Lagos. Then we had the whole Nigerian Electricity Supply Company, when we had eventually had the Electricity Ordinance of 1929, which really means that there had been the regulatory environment in place, that there had been a kind of a regime, a legal and regulatory regime to make sure energy becomes accessible then, as far back as then. Then over time, which is why legal and policy will always be vital. Over time, after Nigeria became a kind of an independent nation, then we saw a trend that tended to centralize energy, both access, regulation, and distribution. And that was where the problem started from. Because the federal government owned the energy structure as a kind of monopoly. So the government decided and determined the amount you buy your energy, the area where the energy is supplied, how much you pay, how much you've devoted in terms of funding, a whole lot of other values. Then erroneously in the law, energy became a centralized thing for the federal government, meaning states and local government and communities had no say in terms of energy. To push the frontier, we now pointed out that the regime was such that under the constitution, as far back as 1979 and the 1999 constitution, which Nigeria uh, was operating and is still operating, we realized that the regulatory environment, the constitution actually envisaged a decentralized model. We now pointed out that if you go to the second schedule of the Nigerian constitution, it gives state access to electricity off grid, while 13 deals with national grid. Attempted 14, 13 deals with national grid, 14 deals with off grid. We now said inherently energy had been decentralized under the Nigerian structure, but implementation, application was kind of centralized. So we started kicking against that. It took like about 15 years or more of consistent advocacy everywhere in the media, publication, and the rest to get the government to change the narratives. Government eventually agreed that under the constitution, energy was decentralized. But under the now repealed Nigerian Electricity Reform Act, Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, the law contradicted the constitution and centralized the, the energy regime. We pointed out that that was unconstitutional, and we kicked against that. We started pointing it out at conferences like this, and the government. We also pointed out that the law was not a piece of legislation capable of operationalizing the power sector in that country. And we drew inferences from other countries why the law was inadequate. We pointed out like well over 250 errors in the law. We said the government should change. And the government said they were not able to change immediately because they just privatized the power sector. And they wanted to just test run the sector before they start to tinker with the law. But gladly, we didn't give up. Recently, we now had a new law, Electricity Act of 2023, which changed a lot of things. One, it aligns with the constitution. Even the constitution was also amended to give powers to states to be able to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity, both for on-grid and off-grid. That was a major win for us in the country. Now, the Electricity Act now responded to what the Constitution now provides for, and now liberalize and decentralize the regime. And then I've had this theory that I was kind of abandoned it everywhere I went. I call it DOPS. The theory is called decentralized energy options. That was the theory I used to push the advocacies, and eventually we got decentralized as a nation. But there are still challenges. There are challenges in the sense that now we have a regime that makes it possible for federal and state to generate electricity by way of generation, transmission, and distribution, including services, be it off grid or on grid. But the response level for states has been kind of discouraging because almost 2 years after the passage of the law, we haven't seen states, the component state, stepping in to take advantage of the law to increase energy access in their respective states. And that's key because when you're talking of decentralized energy solution, it means we can't continue to talk or engage energy related issues at the level of the federal government. We can't even be talking of a federated grid structure in the 21st century. It means we have to look at those mini grids. We have to look at those renewables. We have to scale up solarization agenda. We have to increase access to the rural areas, to communities. And that cannot be an issue for the federal government. The state and local government are closest to the communities. And we now talk of a bottom-up approach to energy solution as against top-down approach that we've had in place in Nigeria and other and most African countries. We also pointed out that the countries should start to come together in synergies. We realized the West African power pool, which was a regional intervention, Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, and other countries came together to drive that regional intervention. And we also noticed that model, that project is also challenged. It's challenged to the extent that whatever happens at the national levels of the partnering countries will naturally affect the success or otherwise of the West Africa Power Pool. So we now push the narratives at the level of the countries to change their regime, to free up the space for their respective states and local government and communities to get involved. We've started seeing like kind of a appreciable levels of response, particularly from the Nigerian angle. Of course, we're still having issues with our neighbors because Nigeria supplies electricity to a number of African countries. And in the case of Niger, Nigeria also recently reduced access in Niger by 54%. So on the one hand, we're advocating for increased access through decentralized options, through community initiatives, through rural electrification. On the other hand, the big players pulling back their intervention, their access, and they're not reasonably committed to a kind of regional intervention that will have stem the tide and increase energy access. So we struggle in that regard. So, and increasingly, we've been seeing the intervention of science and technologies. We've been seeing researchers, African researchers, coming up with interesting solutions in terms of energy incubation, access, and 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 derivatives, meaning uh, deriving energy from other technical sources. That's interesting. So the challenge for us as a region or developing countries in terms of access is to continue to push the agenda for increased access and decentralized options, small scale power, rural based electrification. Like when the conference was to be introduced by the moderator, she alluded to somebody who's never even seen electricity in his or her lifetime, and perpetually people are in darkness. And it's unheard of in this time and age that people have never seen electricity ever in their life. And the reality is that there are communities that they've never witnessed electricity, they've never had access ever. Because those are the marginalized communities, those are the marginalized rural communities. And what do we need to do as stakeholders? What exactly do we need to do? The challenges are there. Each time you engage the government, they talk of funding. Then we also have challenges in terms of the regulatory environment. We also have challenges in terms of attitude of the people. And I can go on and on and on. But the most important thing, as I try to begin to wind down, I don't know how much time I have because I'm scheduled to talk from 10 a.m. to like 10:35 a.m. So I want to wind down. I'm saying that for developing countries particularly, the future of energy and access to energy can only be planned on extensive pursuit of renewable options and solutions. Because renewable options is better, could be cheaper, reliable, cleaner, and readily available. Initially, it will come at a huge cost. Whatever intervention the respective stakeholders of government will do may come at the level of indirect subsidies for procurement of those solar panels, for those windmills, for solar farms, and other small-scale energy options at the level of the rural communities. One good story about the Nigerian state structure is such that we have two major institutions that they've been driving the narrative, they've been driving the intervention. We have, even under the Electricity Act of 2025, we have Rural Electrification Agency, REA. That's the agency of the federal government that it starts with the responsibility of community-based energy solutions, the kind of solutions we're looking at this conference. Government fund the agencies. The agencies also levy operators in the power industry by way of tax. And these funds are used to install solar panels and other rural-based electricity initiatives. There is also another agency which is a designated fund. We call it Rural Electrification Fund. That's a designated fund for rural-based energy solutions, small scale, at the level of the communities. These are the kind of initiatives that other countries may deploy. And energy is not something that the government should or could fund successfully all over the world. It calls for synergies, calls for partnership between the federal government, depending on the arrangement, state government, local government, or rural communities, groups, associations, NGOs, all of us. So that at the end of the day, we drive communities closer to energy access, which, as I said in the course of my introduction, can't be sufficient, but we may guarantee access for a few hours as against total darkness. So the way to go, as I wrap up, is decentralized energy options. Our engagement should always focus on bottom-up approach. Our intervention should be bottom-up. Our policy intervention should be bottom-up. Our funding structure should be bottom-up. Our engagement strategies should be bottom-up. If you do top-down, you're going to exclude the most crucial set of human beings, which is the communities. And we need to empower them through decentralized energy options and solutions. I guess I'll pause there for now. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Speaking of bottom-up approach, you've talked about it, but there's still a question on that from Gift Barry Dakara. He says that, good morning, Prof. Please, how effective would this decentralized energy option of the bottom-up approach as against the top-down approach in power generation be? I would truly want to understand your conception of the bottom-up approach. So I think they're still trying to kind of understand how that is. And then a follow-up question to that is that the energy sector is highly influenced by the global power play and impact brought by regional conflicts. So many raw materials, such as rare earths, are getting less and less accessible for smallholders. So in this case, Jade Lynn is asking that how do you use that? How do you implement bottom-up approach as against top-down, especially when some of those resources are less accessible? So maybe I'll let you take that, and then we'll keep
Let
that's
me
a
take it
dialogue.
too. Thank you. Thank you. Let me take it to how effective will the bottom up approach be? What we mean by bottom up is that, um, for instance, now if you're going to look at generating electricity provide gas, that would be expensive. And you're looking at cheaper energy options. For instance, you want to generate energy in clusters. You band together like two, three communities that wouldn't consume any significant amount of power. That's bottom up. Two, look at industrial areas. Look at industrial areas. You tie them to common community responsibility. We call it SRC, social responsibility, social or community responsibility, corporate social responsibility. Some may call it corporate social responsibility. Where you have industrial hubs, you want to get them to dedicate a component of part of the energy they consume to the rural communities in that area. You want to embark on, of course, it's happening in Nigeria, some politicians and well-to-do people may just assist communities by giving them solar lights. Just go to one community, donate solar lights, light them up. Some donate charging points where you through inverters, to set up a kind of inverters where people can charge their phones. Well, this kind of small scale options, where people, the communities can have access. And again, uh, instead of going for mega electricity projects, we've been encouraging governments to scale down so that you have hybrid, you have embedded power solution, you have captive energy solutions. Embedded is like generating electricity in clusters or mini grid options. Captive is when, as an agency, as an institution, as a corporation, you generate electricity for your use exclusively. But when you generate electricity through captive, you're not going to sell it. The law restricts you from selling it. So, and if your need is about 1.2, let's say 10 megawatts, and you are generating 12 megawatts, it simply means you are in excess of 2 megawatts. Community-based top bottom-up solution will be, okay, the excess 2 hours that you have, channel it to the rural communities closest to your location as a corporate social responsibility. Some, if their peak hour during the day is 8, meaning the excess will be like 2 megawatts during the day. And when they shut down the operation for some offices and they have like 5 or 10 megawatt of hydro electricity, we'll say, okay, you know what? Give those to homes. Homes will need those megawatts in the night. Give it to homes. Even if it's not free, let it be subsidized. Let's look at community-based energy solutions as against top-down. So you can do so by encouraging corporation, companies, businesses to seed off certain amount of their energy to the rural communities where they operate. Another bottom-up solution was what I advocated for the Nigerian government. Say, okay, you have 774 local governments in Nigeria. Our current capacity as a nation is about 4,500 or less. So if you get each and every of the local government to generate 1 megawatt every other year, meaning in the political life of a regime of 4 years, each local government will generate at least 2 megawatts in 4 years, essentially through renewable options and the rest. Put those together, that's almost like 80% of our current energy access or capacity as a country. Those are the kind of initiatives we're looking at. Let's start small. Let's small scale energy access is what we're focusing on. That's what we're recommending. As against huge megawatts that may take 10, 15 years to come on stream. We've had so many energy projects in Nigeria. We have the Kashimbila, we have the Mambila, and the rest. They've been home, some have been home since the 80s, some since 90s. So the challenge is to be able to pull it through. And if you have a new government, they're not going to, maybe the government is not interested in funding it, funds are not channeled in that direction. So the project is going to be idle. Or if we about solarization and the way things are going now, extensive solarization, because a lot of homes are getting off the grid. Most homes now they have their batteries called inverter. They also have solar panels. It might be expensive initially, but as they scale up production and access, the cost will naturally come down. And we see social intervention from the political players, the business communities, lighting up the streets. And that's happening, at least as a kind of a community-based response. So those are the kind of bottom-up approach I advocate. Small scale, go down through your communities, go down through your rural communities, local government, identify clusters of communities. Like now we've been having issues of criminality in certain parts of Nigeria and in other countries. Because these communities never had access to electricity. So in that situation, if you look at some rural communities like villages, like 5 villages, give them like 10 solar panels, it costs nothing if it's efficient and effective and well structured. Meaning most of these crimes happen in the night. So meaning the communities are light up. It will be difficult for anybody to come and pass on them and start to cause mayhem in those communities. People hide under the guise of darkness to perpetrate evil. So light up community A, community B, community C, decentralized energy options. That's what we mean by bottom up. Then we cannot start to talk about megawatts for industrial use, for business purposes. But let's focus on the people. Let's give them access. That's what I'm advocating. But talking of global power play in terms of energy, I agree with that. I agree with that to an extent. If you talk of the interplay of global politics or what I call global bureaucratic inconsistency, we're talking of mega energy projects in that regard. For instance, the West African power pool, then the tension between certain regions in Canada and the US, So I'm not supplying, I'm cutting off your supply. Like the power play between Nigeria and Niger that led Nigeria to reducing energy supplies to Nigeria by 54%. Those are power play. When you're talking of mega projects, then you can may say element of power play, meaning investment boycott, denial of access through technology snob, meaning okay, you need this my technology for purposes of your national grid. Okay, because I'm not in good terms with your country diplomatically, advances your country, I'm not going to sell this technology to you because I know you need it for your transmission lines. Those are the kind of global power play you see. Some benefit from global funding and they pull back funding to specific or by a particular country. That's another high level global power play uh, at the level of the global diplomacy. Of course, we see that those kind of stuff happen increasingly happen at high levels because most of these investments in the power sector they're hugely expensive. So developing countries, particularly in Africa, rely so much on foreign direct investment. And foreign direct investment, they've come with their own global power play. You only want to go and invest in countries that are friendly to you, giving you incentive. We have all those options. But we're not even looking in that direction because our focus this morning is to empower communities through decentralized energy solutions and green innovation. We're saying, okay, the excessive landfill that we have in Lagos, how can you deploy that to give to generate energy for rural population, rural communities? I always cite the example of a city in Munich in Germany. It was a small community that was challenged energy-wise. They needed uh, energy to heat their homes in the summer, of course, and to cool it off, cool their homes when they're in the winter. They now had a kind of a shortfall in the input, which is landfill waste. Then the municipalities came up with a policy of reduction in waste collection to stimulate access, meaning, for instance, if waste collection was like $2, they reduce it to $1 to encourage people to generate waste so as to have feedstock for the for the renewable power plants. After reduction in waste collection, the municipalities were still not getting enough in terms of waste. Then they brought out another policy. They were collecting waste for free. They were still not getting enough waste for renewable energy. They scaled up their policy intervention. They started paying $1 to stimulate the people to generate enough waste. Those are the kind of community-based intervention that we may deploy to increase energy access at the local level. But by the time we're talking of global, regional, international level, then we want to deal with those power play issues, the bureaucratic issues, the issues of diplomacy, bilateral funding things, and then definitely you have to contend with the power play at that level. Let me pause for now.
Thank you so much, Prof. Because due to our time, if you can please, we have lots of questions for you, about 11 of them in the Q&A box. If you can please attend to them one after the other, we'll really appreciate it. One of the questions that was asked, though, that I think is important is that how do one generate energy from forest? So I think you just mentioned that energy can be generated from forest. So I don't know if you
Yes.
want that or you would.
Okay. That was a typical case in Namibia. I did a paper for Namibia. We were like talking of policy options to generate energy. Then they came up with their home intervention saying debushing as in bush, DE, debushing. I think from the shrubs they have in those communities, of course, I'm sure scientists will tell you that we have energy locked down beneath the soil. I'm sure you know we have energy locked down beneath the soil. So for the because of the density in their forest, then the research in their country showed that they could generate power from the kind of shrub they have in their forest. So they now deploy energy to stimulate heat in those communities, and they extract energy from the heat. That's where innovation options, green innovations will step in. The environmentalists, of course, were the one in the forefront of diffusion technology. And of course, I know it's going to take a lot of funding, a lot of research to be able to identify uh, the kind of forest that will be appropriate to generate energy through debushing solution. But what they did in Namibia was called debushing, and you could Google it, debushing. I can put it in the chat so that people can research it. And generating energy from forest, the case of Namibia, is going to pop up
Thank
how
you.
they generate. Yeah, so it's not because of the topography in Namibia. It's not something you will likely going to have in all countries. Some countries that their topography might not be suitable, but the topography of their forest composition was such that they could generate energy because of the density in that. So let me have the second question. Let me quickly respond to them briefly so that I can.
Okay,
Step
thank you
up.
so much for the time. If you can please respond to those questions in the Q&A, just by typing the response in the Q&A box. But
Okay.
just to put a
Okay.
little bit of scientific, yeah, thank you so much. While we wait for the next speaker, Dr. Litu Seti, before you come up, I'm just going to put a little bit of scientific angle to how do you generate energy from forest. So we do know that forests are renewable source of bioenergy, and that is what Prof was talking about from the trees. So primarily from biomass. So you can get organic material that are derived from trees and of course plants. So for instance, you can look at things like the residues from forests. So the sawdust, your logging residues, your leaves, your branches, and some of these things are not used, during paper production. So most of these things you can collect them, like the branches, the leaves, the bark, the sawdust, and you can use them to convert them to fuel. And sometimes, of course, this might not be too sustainable, is when you burn this biomass to produce steam. So that's like direct firing through combustion. So that's another way to do that. And of course, you can also generate through a process that we call gasification. And so what you need to do with that is that the biomass that you collect, so from the trees, the plants and all that. So the more the biomass, the more electricity that you get. So with gasification, the biomass is heated in like a low oxygen environment, and it produces something we call the syngas. The syngas is a mixture of carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane. And another way you can also generate electricity from the forest will be the popular one, which is the biogas, and that's a process of anaerobic digestion. And this process, this is where microorganisms break down like organic material in an oxygen-free environment to create biogas, and then you can capture that and you can use it for your cooking. And lastly, you can do that through wood pellets and briquettes. So forest biomass, you can process like the pellets, but you also have to understand that whatever that you do in forest, must be done sustainably. So if you're talking about green, you can't burn too much of stuff. If you're using microorganisms to degrade them to generate electricity, then it's more sustainable. So one has to be careful that while we're trying to generate electricity from the forest, we're not leading to other environmental issues like deforestation, like biodiversity loss, and like carbon emission. This